If we call Eretz Yisrael the heart of Klal Yisrael, then certainly I can say that the past few weeks we've experienced a heart attack. And there's no doubt in my mind that just like a heart attack affects the whole body, every one of you has been affected all over Chutz La'aretz as well, on the terrible tragedies of the last few weeks and the experience we've been having in Eretz Yisrael. I have to tell you that when I was at the funeral, there were so many young people at that funeral that all I kept thinking about was all of you, the alumni of Tiferet. And in the spirit of shlucho kemoso, the idea in Chazal that when you send a shaliach, it's as if you're going yourself, I attended that funeral for all of you, thinking about you, thinking about how you're processing such a terrible loss in Klal Yisrael, and thinking about how each one of you are doing and developing in your own ways, and knowing that it's hard. It's hard to digest what's happened, and I certainly would like to give a little bit of direction based on this week's parsha. In this week's parsha, we know that Balak hires Bilam to curse Klal Yisrael. And it says in this week's parsha, Va'ata lechana, you go, Bilam, says Balak, Arali et ha'am hazeh, curse that nation, Ki atzumhu, because that nation, Klal Yisrael, they are very great. Atzumhu mimeni, they're greater than me. Ulai yuchal nakebo, and if you curse them, then maybe I can beat them. Ve'agarshenu min haaretz, and I will be able to expel them from the land. Says the Nesiv Shalom, what land is he expelling Klal Yisrael from? We know that Balak was in the Midbar. We were passing through. We hoped to get to Eretz Yisrael, but we certainly weren't going to be expelled from his land. Says the Medrash, well, the land that it's talking about, the land that he would wanted us to be expelled from, it says, is Eretz Yisrael. As it says in Bamidbar Rabbah, that they shouldn't get into Eretz Yisrael. So the Nesiv Shalom asks, why does Balak care if we enter Eretz Yisrael? And if anything, it should make him happy, because then we're no longer in his territory. We're entering a whole new area and have to deal with the Canaanite nations. But the Nesiv Shalom says, "Umitam ze bikshu shaleichnetzu Eretz Yisrael, ki hashleimut hu shel Yisrael ha'am nivchar, hi b'knisatam le'Eretz Yisrael u'v'kiyum ha'mitzvot hatzluyos ba." Says the Nesiv Shalom, it is dafka the entry into Eretz Yisrael and doing the mitzvot teluyo ba'aretz, those special mitzvot, like Shemitah, Maser, Trumos, the different things that are required in Eretz Yisrael, that is the completion of the Naaseh v'Nishma calling of keeping the Torah. The Shleimut of Klal Yisrael is dependent on Eretz Yisrael. So if Balak could just prevent us and expel us from the land, then we would never achieve our great fulfillment and potential. Baruch Hashem, Balak fails gloriously at his task, and Klal Yisrael continue on to their entry to Eretz Yisrael. But it makes you start to understand why our enemy doesn't want us in Eretz Yisrael. It makes us start to understand why we need to see Eretz Yisrael so chashuv in our lives. And I'd like to take the model for a second of Moshe Rabbeinu to see the flip side of the coin, an attitude very different about Eretz Yisrael, from Moshe Rabbeinu himself in Parshas V'eschana. Now we know Moshe doesn't get to go into Eretz Yisrael, and we also know that it was very difficult for him. And we know that in Parshas V'eschana he davens and he davens and he davens till the Ribbono Shel Olam says, enough of this already. You're not going in, I'll let you see it, but that's it. But Moshe, it's never enough. In an impressive way, in an incredible sense of what the role the land of Israel would play, he wants more, and he doesn't want to give up. And I'll share with you a few psukim from Parshas V'eschana. It first says, V'shamarta et chukav ve'mitzvotav. Says Moshe Rabbeinu to Klal Yisrael, keep the Torah, keep its commandments. Asher anochi mitzavcha hayom asher yitab lecha levanecha acharecha. And if you do it well, it'll be good for you and your children after you. They will continue in the line. The next pasuk, after instructing us or recommending that we keep the Torah, mitzvot, and commandments, says, very strangely almost placed, Az yavdil Moshe shalosh arim be'ever hayarden mizrach hashamesh. It's talking about the placement of the Arei Miklat. And the next pasuk says, and at that point, right there, Moshe began to set aside the 3 cities for the Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge, before the Jordan River. Now there's a lot to explore here, but we'll try to leave it in a limited sense. First of all, Moshe Rabbeinu, he wasn't allowed to go into Israel. The Arei Miklat would not be mechuyav on Klal Yisrael until we settled Eretz Yisrael. And there had to be 3 Arei Miklat, cities of refuge, in Eretz Yisrael itself. So what's Moshe doing? Why is he setting up these 3 Arei Miklat outside of the Jordan River before Eretz Yisrael, when no commandment is necessary? Says the Kli Yakar that we see Moshe's desire and will and enthusiasm. For him, it's not about getting schar, it's not about the credit. He wants a piece of Eretz Yisrael. He wants a piece of the mitzvot teluya ba'aretz. He recognizes them as the greatest schus, and he wants that to be part of his experience as well. Not just Shabbos, not just kashrus, not just all of the halachot that he has passed over to Klal Yisrael, but he knows that the makeh b'patish, the finishing blows of the vessel, of the shleimus of Klal Yisrael, like the Nesiva Shalom described by Balak, is the entry into Eretz Yisrael. So right after he recommends to Klal Yisrael, keep the statutes, keep the mitzvot, follow them, and then your children after will too. It says, Az Yavdil Moshe. Moshe shows Klal Yisrael his enthusiasm right after this statement. He is the instructor, the morenu, par excellence, practicing what he preaches, telling Klal Yisrael, you want to keep the mitzvot in Eretz Yisrael? Well, I'm going to start you off. I may not be able to see you into Eretz Yisrael, but I will start the Arei Miklat that I can on this side of the Jordan River. And Moshe Rabbeinu's enthusiasm for Eretz Yisrael becomes contagious. You know, the same imagery comes to mind when it comes to David HaMelech. The Ramona Shalom told him, for whatever reasons, you may not build the Beis HaMikdash. Just like Moshe was restricted from Eretz Yisrael, which would have been what he felt the completion of his duty in this world. David HaMelech, did he not want to build the Beis HaMikdash with all of his soul and his heart? But the Ramona Shalom says, you may not. So what does David do? He prepares everything down to the last detail for Shlomo HaMelech. He lays the cornerstone. He buys the land. He does anything that he can because he wants a piece of it. Even if the Rabboni Shalom's not going to let him complete it, he wants to start off the experience at least because he is so enthusiastic. That same enthusiasm is shared by Moshe Rabbeinu in Eretz Yisrael. And he cannot see himself through to the land, but that doesn't mean he's not going to try to do even the smallest element of mitzvah teluya ba'aretz, to say that I'm a part of this. I have a piece of this along the way. And it's funny because mitzvah teluya ba'aretz is so much of our experience right now here in Eretz Yisrael. I'm thinking about it even in today's modern day, because we are about to greet the year of Shemitah. And even Rav Chaim Kanievsky said that if anyone wants to be working on themselves right now during this time of year, they should be learning Hilchos Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael, because it's incredibly difficult. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I took Musar from all of this, 7 years ago, the last round of Shemitah, I had just moved to Israel a couple years before, and like a balat tshuva, I said, no way! I can't handle the challenge of these halachot. I am going l'chumra on everything. I'm too nervous. Kedushat Shvi, Otzar Haaretz, Otzar Beistin. It's incredibly difficult to understand all the halachot. I'm going to be so machmir that I don't have to deal with the Kedushas Haaretz. Well, I'll tell you, 7 years later, I'm taking the Musar of the Gdolei Hador who are telling us, no. You must learn the laws of Shemitah. You must become an expert in those laws. To live in Eretz Yisrael, you are zocha to keep the mitzvot tuya ba'aretz. My attitudes changed so much. I've been inspired by the words of Moshe Rabbeinu to understand that it's a schus to keep mitzvot tuya ba'aretz. And therefore I've been hitting the books just the same way a seminary girl would. Looking at the halachot of Shemitah, hoping this year that we will be eating what's called Kedushat Shvi'is. The Ramban says when you eat Kedushat Shvi'is, the peiros of Shemitah, you ingest a certain Kedusha. I'm excited to anticipate all of that, and I'm truly, truly trying as much as I can to follow the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, Az Yavdil Moshe. that whatever we can do in Eretz Yisrael, we should be doing. By the way, I even noticed that they started beautiful stucco organizations that people in Chutz La'aretz can help to support farmers this year who keep Shemitah. So even people living in Chutz La'aretz, like all of you, can get what we would call a piece of the action. All you have to do is give $18 to one of these Karens for Shemitah. I'm happy to assist you with that, by the way. And you too can be a part of Az Yavdil Moshe. It's an enthusiasm about Israel. An enthusiasm about the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, the spirituality, the inspiration that every single one of you has benefited from, certainly in your year in Israel. You know, I don't find it coincidental that next week's Parsha has one of the most, I guess we would call it, feminist pieces in the Torah, and that is Benot Slefchad. The daughters of Slefchad say, we want Yerushat Eretz Yisrael. Our father died, we have no brothers. Moshe Rabbeinu, we see ourselves there. And what's crazy is the Benot Slefchad were asking for this when they were still sitting in the Midbar. But they saw themselves in Eretz Yisrael. Az Yavdil Moshe. They saw themselves already as Benos Eretz Yisrael, and they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, when are we going to get what I called the piece of the action? And Moshe turns to the Ribbono Shel Olam in the next week's Parsha and says, what do I do? What is the halacha for these Benot Slefchad? And the Ribbono Shel Olam says, if they are going to say Lama Yigara, why should we lose out? We want a piece of Eretz Yisrael. If they are going to have that type of enthusiasm, the Ribbono Shel Olam says, Kain Benot Slefchad Dov wrote, they speak correctly, they speak right. Moshe Rabbeinu go right to them and grant them the Yerusha, the Chelek that their father should have gotten, because they have that idealism, they have that sense of where they're headed and the role Eretz Yisrael has to play in that shleimus, just like the Nesiva Shalom establishes in this week's Parsha. You know, I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to see Eretz Yisrael suffer this week. It's certainly painful for us as well, but I'll tell you this. It's time to not take the balak attitude, but to take the Moshe Rabbeinu attitude. And we have to look at Eretz Yisrael as a place of passion and inspiration and a place of spirituality. We have to direct our hearts there. We have to direct our minds and our souls there on a daily basis. And if we do that correctly, we will be inspired, we will grow, we will perfect ourselves, we will stand as an or l'goyim, a light upon the nations, in every single sense of the word. It is difficult, and I think about who may be watching this from the different years of Tiferet. I miss you immensely. And I think that as we hit our 10th year of Tiferet, it's crazy to me to think about how many Baruch Hashem graduates have left Tiferet. There are over 500, maybe 600 of you already. And it's so incredible to think about the passion and the representation of all of those people. And I'll tell you that for me personally, to be in touch with you in the summer would be the greatest nachas to me. During the year it's difficult, but I am so available to you, especially now here in the summer. My email is still lnstark@aol.com. I would love to be in contact with you. I would love to share ideas with you or just to hear an update of how you're doing. Please email me. Please be in contact with me through WhatsApp or whatever is easiest for you. Because I have to tell you that just like you think of Eretz Yisrael, that there's a piece of you left here, I think about all of you and think there's a piece of me with you. And I so very much want to stay in touch with you. May these weeks be a source of nechama for the beautiful families that have dealt such a tragedy in the past few weeks. May Klal Yisrael find a nechama. I mean, the next, coming weeks, going into the 3 weeks, no longer be, unfortunately, the mourning of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But may we start to supply and build in that spirit of Az Yavdil Moshe, the Binyan Bayis Shlishi, Bimheira B'Yameinu. Amen.